Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours for the last week in April. So, for these end of the month sessions, we pick a specific subject and we usually do a bit of show and tell as well as answering your questions. And this time, we're going to provide an introduction to Marketing Cloud and Pardot. And I'm really delighted to welcome our team of experts, our panel of experts on this topic. Despite how much they all know between them and collectively about these tools, all three of them are joining a Hub Office Hours panel for the first time. So welcome to you all, and thank you very much for making the time to be with us today. And I'd just like to remind those of you who are on the call, thank you, Michael, for pointing out that, yes, it's an all-wit panel. I'd just like to remind people, as I always do, none of us work for Salesforce.org. These sessions are run by the Hub community, and we all volunteer our time and our talents to share our Salesforce knowledge with you, because we enjoy talking about Salesforce. As usual, we won't be able to cover every aspect of such sophisticated tools in the short hour that we have. But if you're considering your options, or if you're getting started with either of these tools, Marketing Cloud or Pardot, then we hope that we'll be able to point you in the right direction and maybe give you some ideas for further research. As usual for these sessions, the way that we do this is if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat first, post them to everybody, put them in the chat as we're talking, and then we'll pause for the answers, or we'll try and incorporate the answers into what we're discussing. So questions in chat first. As usual, since there are a lot of us on the call, I'd be grateful if you could mute your microphone throughout the session, unless you're presenting, or we ask you to speak, of course. So please mute those mics. Actually, everybody's being very good today. You're all getting well trained. So let's get started. I know that during this session, Julie is going to give us an overview of Marketing Cloud, and I believe both Samantha and Kirsten have will introduce Pardot and have some favourite bits of Pardot they'd like to talk about. But before that, I wondered, panel, if any of you would be brave enough really to explain how these two systems differ as a sort of conversation starter. I mean, that I know that both those tools, they were created by technology companies that then Salesforce.com acquired and rebranded. And I know that both of these are tools for marketeers. But I wondered, they're so often mentioned together, but are they actually interchangeable? I mean, is one cheaper than the other, or are they similar? Do they do different things? Why would you choose one over the other for your organization? Anybody want to dive into that?
I love this question.
Well, the good news is you don't actually have to choose. You can use both, and they have complementary uses and can be used to achieve some of the same purposes in different ways.
So that's
what were you going to say?
Julie. Sorry, that's Julie. You're the one who's talking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was it
yes.
Sam that you said you loved the question?
Yeah. Yeah, I would actually hear what Julie said. You can use both. Once upon a time, when I was a solo admin, I had actually looked at adopting them both to meet all of our needs. As far as how they're different, and if you were trying to select one over the other, especially from a cost perspective, I think by far the simplest and by no means complete explanation would be that Pardot is probably a better fit if you are B2B and just starting with marketing automation. Marketing Cloud is a little bit more powerful on the B2C or business to consumer side, and it does a lot. It does a whole lot. It is a cloud of solutions, and it can be a little overwhelming. So if you don't have your marketing strategy clearly defined, if you don't have a team kind of devoted to that, it might be a bit much to take on if you've never used a marketing automation platform before. Oh, I have a question. Define marketing automation, since it's, yeah, that's true. It's not the same as email marketing. So one of the things I see a lot is we're moving from MailChimp and we want to do marketing automation. That's awesome. That is a step forward, but it's not just email marketing. Pardot and Marketing Cloud both are not just sending mass emails to a list of people. It goes a little bit beyond that. So when you hear things like segmentation, one-to-one conversations, building a journey, all of these things that kind of elicit this image of I, as a marketer, am taking the hand of a prospect or a potential customer or an existing customer and having a one-on-one conversation with them in mass. That's marketing automation. It's also cross-channel. So it's not just emailing them, it's having a social media presence. It is inbound marketing, making sure that when someone comes to your website, they are seeing content that is relevant to them. It is scoring activities, how engaged, measuring engagement that your constituents, clients, customers, prospects have with you, and making real decisions on how to move forward with those relationships.
So do both of them fulfill some of that idea of the scoring and the cultivating relationships? It's interesting. I'd kind of got the impression that Pardot is a bit more when you're initially kind of building the relationship, so you might work more with leads in Pardot, whereas Marketing Cloud is perhaps more a bit for your established audience. Or have I got the wrong impression about those?
I think that's a very good use case. I would say that Pardot, we often see those strong lead generation powers of Pardot coming into play when we are trying to make connections. So a lot of good stuff with landing pages and how did we first get to meet this constituent. So definitely lead generation. However, Marketing Cloud certainly can work across the spectrum of leads, contacts, and even person accounts, which is fun. And but Pardot would have more of the lead scoring, and does definitely have some great automation and engagement plans to cultivate those relationships. And in Marketing Cloud, those are journeys, which can similarly, they're similar but different tools, and those journeys can also be used to send emails, listen for different activity, take a wait, then do something. So some really smart engagement opportunities.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a great distinction. And I suppose one of the and then one of the other things, I mean, there are other marketing automation tools out there, but I guess the great advantage of these two is that they're so tightly integrated into your Salesforce instance, aren't they? That it's an extension of what you do in Salesforce.
Absolutely. I think at the risk of getting kicked out of the community entirely, I actually started my Salesforce journey with a marketing team running both Salesforce and our marketing automation platform. I actually learned marketing automation through Marketo, not Pardot or Marketing Cloud. So
that's fine. We're not going to kick you out. And and I mean, the interesting thing is, of course, how all of these things have developed. Because only a few years ago, I mean, probably people would have gone to Marketo, wouldn't they? Because it's only really recently that the integration of these other tools has become so tight and so well formed. So
that's true. Thank you.
So you said that Pardot. You said that it's quite useful in a B2B context. So there's a question from TT. Is Pardot really only useful or only useful for corporate fundraising, or does it help with individual fundraising also?
It works for individual fundraising as well. I work primarily with nonprofits, and Pardot is very, very amenable to the NPSP model.
And then Eileen is actually asking Brennan, who'd posted about why they love Pardot, but I know both. I know Kirsten, you haven't spoken yet, and I know you're a big Pardot fan. Why do you love Pardot? Oh, Kirsten, are you there? Oh. Okay. Brennan is saying that thinks it's really easy to use, especially the tracking code. Allows you to see return on investment, and to me, less confusing than Marketing Cloud. I also work mostly with the MPSP. No, that's great. Thank you for that. And Pardot is now bundled with it in a package called Mission Launch as well. Yeah, I was hoping to find Kirsten, but maybe she's lost the mute. The unmute. So Sam, why do you love Pardot then? It's interesting that the tracking codes and the ROI. You mentioned that you really love tags.
Oh, I love tags. Tags are like every time I start a Pardot project with a client, I'm like, the first thing we're gonna do is identify your tags, and you're like, oh, okay.
Well, I think so. I think this might be the right moment that maybe we could have a look at something. And since we've started on the Pardot direction, Julie we will come back and we will look at Marketing Cloud. But let's spend a few minutes. Sam, can we share screens? Can we take a look? Could you show us around Pardot?
It might take a minute because I'm willing to bet it's going to ask me to download something.
I will send you a little meeting request. There we go. What is it? Legal stalking on steroids. That's a wonderful phrase, Brennan. It's kind of like legal stalking on steroids.
When I was studying for my exam, that's all I could think. I'm like, I'm learning how to stalk people. This is awesome.
And are you using it with individuals as well, or do you mostly work with other organizations?
Other organizations. We don't use it in our instance at Now It Matters, but most of our nonprofits do use it. And it's just really easy to use for me. And I just like the interface. Like I've had a little bit of time in Marketing Cloud, and I don't know why it was so confusing to me. Maybe it's just so big that there are a lot of things that nonprofits don't really need that it has. And so having the smaller Pardot system that does actually everything that nonprofits need, it's also not as scary to nonprofits to look at Pardot versus looking at Marketing Cloud.
Yes. Okay. That's great. That's a very good point, and we'll look at that. But then maybe Julie can show us some of the things that are less scary in a little bit. So we can see your screen, Sam. That's great. And Kirsten, I hope your audio does work now, and so feel free to jump in if you have comments. And yes, Michael, I'm sure we'll get to the prices in a little while. So over to you, Samantha.
Great, thank you. So tags, I get to talk about them. I'm so happy. All right, segmentation is a really big part of, I mentioned earlier the leap from traditional email marketing to marketing automation. Segmentation is really the key here. You identify your various audiences and you utilize a marketing automation platform to help you intelligently segment that audience. So that a great example is I work with a nonprofit that does outreach for cancer patients and survivors. The messaging that they are sending to a donor is very different from the messaging that they're sending to a patient. The messaging that they send to a patient is also very different from the messaging that they send to a survivor. You don't want to cross the streams, if you will. when you are sending messages of that type. I think it's a really great example of where segmentation is important. And there are a lot of ways to do that. So I'm getting a little off tags, but it all comes back, trust me. Within Pardot, you have lists. That's kind of your default segment, is you build a list of people that have the various qualities that you want to segment them into. You have segmentation rules that will automatically do that for you. You have profiles, which kind of goes back to lead scoring, that measuring engagement. And then finally, you have tags. The reason I think tags are so important, you use these throughout Pardot. It's not just a way to tag a prospect or a customer. It's not just about segmenting your audience. Everything you create in Pardot can have a tag associated with it. So here, for instance, I have fundraisers, and maybe I have a tag called patients. I'm just gonna create something random here. Let's do an email. I'm going to build a list email. Here are my tags. I can tag this as an email that's going to patients. If I decide to create a form, add form. Oh, look, I have a place to put my tags. This is something that I think is somewhat unique with Pardot. When there are ways to do this anywhere, but Pardot makes it so easy to clearly identify what content is going where. You can tag prospects, you can tag campaigns. Everything can be segmented, not just your audience. It makes it so much easier if you're working with a team to know which content is it safe for me to send to this particular audience. Which form are we expecting those individuals to interact with? What landing pages are we building for a patient versus a survivor? And in that way, you segment not just your audience, but everything else in your database to quickly and easily match those things together. Automation also allows you to tag things immediately. So if someone does fill out a form, you can immediately tag them as a patient. It's almost like having a status field, or it's also very close to, it's the closest thing in Pardot to what's called multi-touch attribution, where you can identify all of the touch points, all of the campaigns that an individual has been a member of. You can do that using tags. So I hope that was helpful, me just talking about my favorite thing. Are there any questions about segmentation, about tags, about any of the terms that I just used flippantly?
There is a question just come in from John McDermott to ask if SMS campaigns are supported either by Pardot or by MC.
Marketing Cloud, I believe, does.
Yeah, can Marketing Cloud support text or SMS?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right, so there you go. And Michael's suggesting that the AE had said it's not part of Pardot. Question from Steve: how does this interface with Salesforce? So I know you're in a demo org, Samantha, but are you actually in a Salesforce instance in a new tab, or are you logged in logged in somewhere separately?
Right now I'm logged in Pardot. The Pardot connector is really more about the data sync. So bringing the data from Pardot into Salesforce or vice versa. You can, we're gonna, what am I building? I'm building a form, right? Yeah, we're gonna build a form really quick to show how it interacts with Salesforce campaigns. Marketing Cloud has a little bit more function, although Pardot actually recently added a little bit more like Salesforce screen time for Pardot, but Marketing Cloud right now is definitely, if you're looking to send an email or actually plan something, Marketing Cloud has a much easier interface for doing that within Salesforce for the most part. Hey, fundraisers. I tag everything. It's something I tell everyone, tag all of the things. Tag your folders. I mean, I know that's not surprising. I'm just saying. I'm consistent.
Tag all the things. Absolutely.
All right, we're gonna just keep moving here. Oh, right, template. Sure. That's great. Thanks. All right, so a lot of things have completion actions. Hey, look, you can add tags. So sorry, I really don't get to talk about it enough. So things that you can do, you can assign to a user. When you assign, let's say through a form fill out, you assign someone to a user, that actually will immediately sync them to Salesforce and assign them. Again, keeping in mind, the idea here originally was a B2B sales process. So the concept is if they fill out this form for region A, I can assign them to a region A salesperson, and then that salesperson is notified someone has filled out an interest form. So that's one way that it will work with Salesforce. You can also add people to campaigns automatically. You can filter by campaign. So there's data shared, but if you want to actually do something native in Salesforce, Marketing Cloud has a little bit more there.
It was interesting that you just as you were going through that and you suddenly was like, oh, I need a template, oh, I need this, oh, I need that. I think that's one of the things that people sort of have to get their heads around with both of these tools, isn't it? That there is quite a bit of setup, and you do need to sort of create your library of templates and basically a set of content, I guess, and things that you're going to use. And so starting off can be a little slow, can't it? Because you need a lot of pieces in place.
Absolutely. Most of the training that I do with my clients is learning the actual user interface for Pardot is very easy. In much the same way that Salesforce is. It tells you specifically what it wants you to do. The tricky part, and what we end up spending a lot of time on, is you have to have your marketing strategy in place. This is an execution tool, in much the same way that Salesforce is an execution tool. Salesforce isn't going to make phone calls for you. It's not going to design the thank you letters that you send to your donors. That's not what it does. It helps you execute that strategy. So a lot of times, I'll see people come in and they're like, Pardot's going to automate all of this stuff and we don't have to do anything. And I'm like, you have to do a lot. You have to do all of the same things. It's just you don't have to do them one at a time, laboriously going through this process. You develop your strategy. That includes, what are my templates? What messaging do I want to share? Do I need to create dynamic blocks of content to show a different paragraph or a different image depending on who's opening an email or who's looking at this landing page? You have to plan all of that before you can have Pardot execute any of it for you.
That's great, thank you. And a question about how do you add to campaigns in Pardot?
Caroline,
again,
can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yay. I'll say something quick, and then Samantha, I'm curious what you would add as well. But
I'm so interested in this campaigns question right now because Pardot and Salesforce campaigns are moving closer and closer together. And I think that's so exciting because it's been super confusing for a lot of Pardot users up until now to have a different definition of campaigns in Pardot versus in Salesforce. And so right now, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that this can look. You can use Salesforce campaigns as completion actions in Pardot, so that like anytime you, for example, get someone on a landing page who fills out a form, you can add them to a campaign in Salesforce as part of the completion action and automate that. But the part about them moving closer and closer together is exciting because there's going to be more ability to talk about attribution in Pardot and using Salesforce reporting. So I know that's maybe confusing to wrap your head around if you're not using the systems right now, but I'm one of the user group leaders here, and we just had some Pardot product folks out to visit last week, and they were giving us some roadmap sneak peek stuff, and it seems like they're moving closer and closer together. And so this is actually going to become a more intuitive thing that builds on Salesforce campaigns instead of having different definitions.
Yes, I think when I saw that, I cried tears of joy.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I get the idea that it's not. So yes, it's not particularly intuitive right now. Or as you say, Kirsten, it's because there's this kind of difference in definition between the two tools.
Yeah, it's not now.
Yeah, I think Pardot treats campaigns like a marketer would, so like as a marketer, it seems really intuitive to me. But to be honest, Salesforce campaigns were never intuitive to me when I was new to Salesforce. And so Pardot, just as a refresher, kind of treats campaigns as the first touch point of a new prospect, whereas Salesforce campaigns can be used for, a pretty expansive way of thinking about campaigns, and you can add leads and contacts, and it's almost more of a way to group people before sending something, or to report on people who've moved through to a certain point. So yeah, I think it's good for everybody that they're moving closer together because it brings marketers closer to salespeople. And for the nonprofits, I want to just put it out there too that I think a lot of nonprofits have a hard time wrapping their head around what Pardot and what Marketing Cloud and what marketing automation is, because Salesforce and marketers use this language of B2B and B2C and marketing versus sales when they're describing the tools. And honestly, nonprofits are kind of a combination of B2B and B2C in a lot of cases. And I'm sure you have a sales type cycle when you're trying to get new members or new donors, but there's kind of this language translation shift that needs to happen. So I think that's part of why it can be tricky to figure out what's right for you.
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you.
It was very bizarre going from Marketo to Pardot for that. Gina had asked, you can only be in one campaign in Pardot. True? Yes, that is true. And that's not the case in Marketo. So going from a multi-touch attribution where I can see all of the different campaigns that someone was involved in that led up to a sale, going to Pardot where a campaign is a one-time thing, that was something it took me a long time to wrap my head around.
That's great. And let's just quickly look at this question from Eileen. I think we'll come back to GDPR a little later. Thank you for the question, Brennan. Eileen is planning to move from our current mass marketing tool. We rely and will rely on key users to manage their own outreach. Does Pardot need to be centrally managed, or can we continue to engage other users? She means presumably within the organization for things like programmatic newsletters and e-solicitations. I'm trying to figure out if we're ready for something like Pardot. Let's talk about Pardot, and then I'm going to throw this over to Julie as well as she starts to talk about Marketing Cloud. So can you engage other users, or do you feel it needs to be centrally managed? in Pardot?
And I don't know if it's a either or proposition from my experience. I think you do usually want to have at least one person who serves as a Pardot admin, who's kind of the power user, who's going to evangelize how you can use Pardot across the organization. Because typically, I know there were some pricing questions, which we'll probably get up to, but with, it's at least, I think, 6,000 minimum for nonprofit pricing, and then goes up from there depending on what licenses you have for Pardot. So if you're paying that much a year, that's usually a significant lift from what you paid with MailChimp, and so you do want to make the most of it and do as much as possible on the platform. So I think, in my experience, what I've seen work well is if you have that central user who knows how Pardot works and has a sense of how the grading and scoring has been set up, and a sense of what other automatic things are going out at a certain time, and then that person can solicit content from different departments to put into those email newsletters. So you could have an email newsletter, a programmatic newsletter that's sent through Pardot, and also an e-solicitation that somebody else is writing and maybe even producing the HTML for that. And then that central Pardot user is the one who's looking at, making sure that one person doesn't get 5 emails from the organization on a given day, and making sure the right segments are getting the right information based on the data in Salesforce.
So would those other people need, the other people who are creating those content, do they need Pardot licenses as well, or is there this idea of that you can have contributors, contributors of content?
Yeah, so currently Pardot licenses are unlimited, so you don't pay per user, and so you certainly can give them access, but then you could also, just share email copy through like a Google Doc if it was just copy that somebody else was writing, and then I guess the person who's doing any kind of design or, finalizing subjects and figuring out the segments would usually need to have Pardot access, but there's different levels of access that you can give, so you don't, for example, you can limit whether someone sends out emails or not, so that you don't, you can kind of control that from within.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, Kirsten, about wanting that sort of control of who's actually sending the emails, to avoid those sort of issues of, as you say, people receiving. You're controlling the flow of communication, aren't you, to make sure that your constituents aren't being bombarded by different departments doing different things. Just in response to a private question, yes, we are recording this session, and I will add it to the playlist in the Hub Office Hours group. Julie, let's take some of these themes and some of the things that we've been talking about and look and see how this all works in Marketing Cloud. So I'm sending you a little request to become the presenter. And so we're interested in, I think, in how emails and how you kind of set up your content, how it all interfaces with Salesforce, and how much you can get other users in the organization creating content for you. So let's see.
Okay, great. Can you
yes, we can see
Marketing Cloud right now? Oh, wonderful. So Marketing Cloud is, I think there was a comment earlier about the concept that Marketing Cloud is just very big, and it really is. It's like the rocket ship of marketing and marketing automation. So I agree, it could be overwhelming if you just try to dive in and unbox Marketing Cloud. There is quite a bit of setup, as you mentioned, with Pardot. So you have to really get everything in place. You have to build your foundation, and then things get really easy. So the implementation is really truly sets the foundation for a successful run. And, great analogies to Salesforce itself, Sales Cloud. You can unbox Salesforce or NPSP and just start putting data in, but really there is a lot to think through for long-term efficiency and really meeting your mission. So some of the things that I love about Marketing Cloud is that you can really keep your users in Salesforce or Sales Cloud. You can do almost everything in Salesforce via the connector. The only two things that we don't do in Salesforce are create our marketing automations and create our content. So anything else you can do from Sales Cloud. This is a demo org, so I do have Lightning enabled, but there are a couple of things that aren't quite ready yet for Marketing Cloud with that, from that perspective. But so if I'm a frontline, development staff or program staff, I don't have to learn the first thing about Marketing Cloud. I can just use this lovely Marketing Cloud tab from within Salesforce and do my sends to a wide variety of constituents. So the great thing about this is that we're using my user permissions based on Salesforce security, who sees what, user profiles and permissions. So all I have to do is click through about 5 little options here, and I can send an email that my marketing team has already created some beautiful, looks like an education newsletter, and I can send this to a report or a campaign. Via another screen, I could send this to a contact, an individual contact, say it's someone I just met. And I can go ahead and just grab a sample report of people who are interested in volunteering. And all I have to do is say that I'm ready to go, and that's it. And my whole send is ready to roll. So it takes about a minute, right? Once you've got everything set up, you can empower your Salesforce users to be leveraging that beautiful branded content very easily from within Salesforce. They never have to learn Marketing Cloud or have another login even. They do have to be connected. But this could be the end of it, and I could just press send and go on with all of my other activities and have sent this beautiful email to my report or campaign or individual. So that's one of my favorite things, because it just frees up our users to focus on what's most important to them. For our Marketing Cloud admins, we would hop over into Marketing Cloud, which just last week had a really neat update. Their most recent update had some really great functionality roll through. So even the home screen probably looks different if you haven't seen this in a little while. So we have our Marketing Cloud calendar and a great dashboard of what's going on in Marketing Cloud. Another thing that I love about Content Builder is this really is for maybe enterprise organizations have very specific or demanding email requirements. We can hop into email content and quickly edit content. But one of the things that I was telling you that I love is that I can actually dive into the HTML of my email content. So you can get hyper granular in Marketing Cloud and have a very high level of control over exactly how your content is displayed and rendered and tested across different devices. And of course, I can do some of that quick viewing, mobile and desktop, make sure everything's responsive and beautiful. I can very quickly and easily insert, if I want to insert personalization, like, hey there, first name, hope you're having a great day, right? It's super quick and easy. So once you've got your content ready to go, we can use our Automation Studio or Journey Builder if we want to set up recurring sends. Those are useful tools. Or I can just send right from this email itself. So I could have, again, my save rockin' and rollin' within just a minute, lots that I can configure. And again, just very, very high level of control over everything that's going on. So I could say I'm going to send to a particular list or a Salesforce report or Salesforce campaign. Again, this is really useful because you don't need to learn Stockwell, or you don't have to understand anything about Marketing Cloud filters. You could really just make your Salesforce reports be what you're going to send. And and this quick Salesforce report. So that integration is so tight between Sales Cloud and Marketing Cloud, and the way that data is flowing back and forth is through our synchronized data source. So we don't have time to really dive into this today, but again, if you're an organization that's truly scaling up or dealing with very large numbers of contacts and external data sources, you can use your data designer to knit together your people, not just your Salesforce data or Marketing Cloud data, but you can use external data sources as well. So our main data source is, of course, our Salesforce contact, for example. But one of the ways that you start to see some of the real value of Marketing Cloud, regardless of the price point, is that you can have access to custom objects. And we had a particular client who had a very specific need that one contact, so one human being, should be able to have as many email addresses as they choose and be able to send to each email address as many newsletters as that subscriber chooses. So that's not available out of the box with really any email tool, but Marketing Cloud has so many tools that you can really start to design very custom applications. So in this example, we have a communication preference custom object, and we're able to use this in Journey Builder to send so that I, as a person, as a constituent, maybe I want to get certain emails at my home email address, certain different emails at my work or volunteering email address, and I can have control over them and still be represented as one contact in Salesforce. So if you've got more complex or more sophisticated email marketing requirements, Marketing Cloud, really the sky is the limit. Because you can actually create your own automation activities. You can get into the deep end and start writing SQL queries and creating your data extracts and grabbing data from here and knitting it together with data over there and creating automations that are going to send emails based on certain time triggers in Automation Studio, kind of getting more into the deep end. But without having to really think through all that complexity, you could stay in Journey Builder, which allows you to still use your Salesforce data. So in this case, we've got a subscriber to donor. We have we have a new contact record in Salesforce. This person has subscribed to our newsletter, and our goal is to get them to become a donor. So we can send a quick email right away. We can actually create a task on that contact owner, create a task for that contact owner to reach out because maybe there's some criteria or something really interesting on this contact record. Wait for a little while and then go back and look at that contact record and see if that contact made a donation. And if they did, then we would have achieved our goal, which we can set up in our goals section of Journey Builder. But if not, after we've waited a couple days and checked that contact record, they haven't yet made a donation, we could send another email and so forth and iterate. And the neat thing about this is it's very, very much just drag and drop. If we wanted to send 2 emails for some reason, we could. If we wanted to try out some data or some different content, we could create splits. This is all sort of when you've made your foundation, you've created your content, created your segments. Journey Builder can really tie it all together and help you really connect to your constituents. But instead of just that drip campaign where it says, hi, new volunteer, wait 2 days, hi again, new volunteer, fill this out, wait 3 days, right? Instead, we can send out that first, hi, new volunteer, what would you like to do? And then based on what that volunteer does, Journey Builder could look at that contact record and make a decision about what to do next and send more relevant information that's really bringing your message in a more meaningful way based on that constituent activity. So a lot of cool stuff and a ton more.
Wow. It is. You're right. It's incredibly impressive. There are a lot of options there, and I have to say I was getting very excited at your sort of little holy grail of being able to send different emails or sending different messages to the same person at the emails that they chose to receive. Yes, that's wonderful. The custom communication preferences object but all lots of different emails all associated with one contact and different content going to different emails. Gosh, I bet there's quite a few people on the call who are just a bit mind blown by that. And let's see. And I think one of the other interesting things about this is what you touched on, Julie, and I think it's the same with Pardot as well, is this whole thing that you do have more flexibility because you have this sort of separate set of subscriber records which are outside of your Salesforce contacts. I mean, they are related, aren't they? But you're actually dealing with in a kind of separate data system to do all of this sophistication.
Well, no, because actually
yes.
my subscribers, our subscribers here actually are our Salesforce contacts in this case. And so we could go look at our subscribers and see who they are. And actually the subscriber ID in Marketing Cloud, the subscriber key is actually that contact ID. You can see it starts with that 003. This is really the same person, again, demo org, but so the subscriber key, the way we set it up using that awesome connector and that data flow is that is our contact record.
Mm-hmm.
The same person.
One thing
absolutely.
I would say to that though is you can have, while they sync, one of the things that I used a lot was I explained it to my users, the concept of a party in a VIP room. Database storage in Salesforce costs money, and when I first took over that particular org, we had way too much of it, and we needed to kind of purge a lot of those contacts. It was cheaper for us to hold on to those contact records in our marketing automation and in Marketo at the time. So one of the things that we decided to do is we called Marketo our party. Everyone was invited to the party. We had just a lot more data storage there. So any contacts, leads, we didn't care. Everyone could be in there. And we set thresholds for what allowed that person to be a contact in Salesforce, or as we refer to it, our VIP room. So you can, if you plan it diligently, have a little bit of that separation, if it makes sense. But yeah, Marketing Cloud, it doesn't work quite the same, but if you went with Pardot, that is actually something you can do, is have a little bit of a distinction between Pardot contacts and Salesforce contacts.
Yes,
that's a really good point, and that's.
Please go ahead.
I was going to say that in a part of our discovery, one of the very first things we dive into is what is your source of truth? And for many clients, their source of truth needs to be Salesforce because they want that 360 view from one place. And so they can have then that cross-channel communication. We didn't even have time to talk about that, but that, Marketing Cloud has mobile, social, advertising, web, that if you choose for Salesforce to be your source of truth or your database of record, then you do position all of your contacts to first live in Salesforce and then go to Marketing Cloud and do other things and then update and check back. That's a really good point. You don't have to do that. You could have Marketing Cloud and Sales Cloud have different representations, but a lot of times we find a lot of value by having that Salesforce be that source of truth. Just depends, right?
Yeah. So I think that takes us back to that concept of execution comes after the strategy. So it is so important with all of the, I mean, anyone here who deals with Salesforce knows it's so important to start with your requirements, with your strategy, with what you actually want to happen, and then implement the tool to mold to that rather.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's great. And I suppose I was, I think part of what I was getting at without making it very clear is something that you mentioned about this whole idea of data storage. I mean, often if people try to integrate their email marketing or their email broadcast tools with Salesforce, and they're bringing in all the tracking of the emails, they can kind of blow through data storage really fast. But with both of these two tools, you do get a separation, don't you? So that you are tracking lots and lots of things, but it isn't going to impact your Salesforce data storage in the same way.
Right, it could.
And you don't have to worry about API call limits and all that.
Sorry, somebody said it could. If you set it up wrongly.
You could blow up your storage if you funnel everything into Salesforce. So what are called individual email results in Marketing Cloud. You have the option of attaching every single one of those back to your contact record or lead. And sometimes that's really important. So for example, if you want to demonstrate that you did send someone an email and they did open it and they did click on it, on that, registration link, you may want to capture that on their contact record forever. But it's probably not as important that all 150,000 of your newsletter subscribers have a newsletter email attached to their contact record. So it gives you that granular control where you have to make those decisions, and then you can clean it up if you need to.
And sorry, yes, there was another comment, something about compliance. One of you was going to say something.
Oh, I said that just you don't have to worry about the API call limits either. So that was something that we had issues with when we were using HubSpot before we moved into Pardot. And I think even beyond that kind of data storage question, there's a lot of stuff that's just easier when you're on the Salesforce platform, as you would be with both Marketing Cloud and Pardot, than if you're working with a standalone product that has an integration. So even beyond data storage, there's a lot more complexity when you're mapping fields to segment on, or trying to deal with custom objects, or trying to report on attribution. Most other platforms have kind of different ways they talk about that journey, and so you're constantly kind of translating between systems. And so I think that's a real benefit of choosing Marketing Cloud and Pardot over some of their competitors.
That's a really good point. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we've skirted around it. Do you have any advice for people out there on pricing, apart from go and talk to your AE? But there is, from what I understand, there are the licenses themselves, and then there's a second part of the pricing is going to be based on, as you suggested, so for Pardot, on your mailable prospects, possibly similarly for Marketing Cloud. Kind of depends how many people you have on your list and how many people you're going to outreach to, doesn't it, as to how much in the end it will cost you. Is that right?
Yeah, there are 3 levels, if you will, for Pardot, which I know because I recently researched this for someone. There's standard, sometimes referred to as basic, pro, and ultimate. A lot like our professional, enterprise, and unlimited. So it starts at $1,000 per month for up to 10,000 contacts. That's billed annually. $2,000 for pro, $3,000 for ultimate, and then of course there are nonprofit discounts, but I don't know what those are. Yeah. So obviously, depending on what it is you want to do, that can help determine which version. And then for Marketing Cloud, I recently saw recently being like a year ago, the cost for this, what they call super messages, but I don't know if that's changed in the past year.
Julie, do you have any idea on pricing?
I know that it's really different for every client, and that's not something that that's not the answer everybody wants to hear right this minute. But every time I've seen, every implementation we do, every client has different size and number of contacts and whether or not they're using different tools. So I wouldn't have a number, but I know that it's something certainly that we could, if anyone has a specific question, we could certainly help define the answer.
Yeah, great, thank you. And it's definitely, isn't it, because there is all of the communication involved, it's definitely something that you need to engage with an AE or with a partner and talk through the options. This isn't just an immediate sort of switch on thing or install from the App Exchange and get going. It does take a lot of setup. There was another, so Brennan had asked a bit earlier about GDPR, which I'm now completely blanking on, general data protection. Anyway, the new rules that are coming into force for the European community about email communications in general. Are you aware of any impact that's having or any changes that are being made in Pardot or Marketing Cloud as a result of that?
Sure,
I can speak briefly.
A specific example from Marketing Cloud is this concept of the right to be forgotten is a newer take on how subscribers are represented. In the past, our perspective had been you never delete subscribers because you permanently want to honor any opt-out, and you need to know that over time so that you don't accidentally resubscribe someone without their express resubscription indication. So sort of that right to be forgotten versus the prior approach. So that's something we've seen come out. There's actually some really good information that we can post about GDPR from Marketing Cloud and from Salesforce, and there's even a new Trailhead module on European Union privacy law basics.
Yep. I also was going to talk about the right to be forgotten. Yay!
We all
want
to be
all the things.
All right, thank you for that. Yes, Karen, a little further up in the chat, Karen had posted the link about Pardot, but it looks like just searching salesforce.com GDPR. I agree. Salesforce is devoting quite a lot of resources to this, and that's great to know that there's a trailhead about it now. That'd be very useful because it's interesting, isn't it? How much. Oh, thank you, Julie. Because yes, it does. Although they are European laws, they will have an impact, I think, on all of those who work in North America as well. Great. We have a minute left. Any more questions from our audience? Yes, there has been a little bit more conversation about pricing going on, and Marketing Cloud is probably much more expensive than Pardot. All right, I'll start to wind things up. This has been extremely helpful and very useful. I know that the demos were quite brief, but I think we've covered a lot of the basics, and we've certainly, as I suggested at the beginning, given people some ideas and some ways to go and look for resources and pointers in the right direction. So that's great. Thank you very much indeed to the panel. Thank you for making the time and coming and sharing your expertise. And to everyone who's in the audience, these are obviously the go-to people if you're interested in finding out more.